Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going deep on this new Korg synth.
The multi-poly, right?
Yeah, it's inspired by the legendary Monopoly, but it's not just a reissue,
Oh, no. This is like next level.
Yeah. Next-gen analog modeling, they're calling it a polyphonic modular system.
It's just got all this wild stuff at limitless playground, as they say.
Exactly. So we're going to break it all down for you. All the specs, all the cool capabilities.
It really is special what they've done with this.
So what is it about the multi-poly that makes it stand out? Compared to the original or even other synths out there?
Well, it takes that raw Monopoly sound and like injects it with all this modern tech. Imagine taking everything awesome about vintage analog and recreating it.
Like algorithms and stuff?
Exactly. Precision.
Okay, so let's get specific. What's this next level analog modeling all about?
So at the heart of it are these virtual voice cards, they're like virtual components.
All right.
And they simulate the tiny little imperfections and variations you find in real analog circuits. Like think of a choir
Okay, yeah.
where each singer has a slightly different voice.
Right.
That's what's happening here. Each voice in the multipoly has its own distinct character. Makes the sound so much richer, so organic.
Oh, I see. So it's not just mimicking the sound, it's mimicking how the actual circuits behaved.
You got it. And get this, these voice cards are always on, even when you can't hear them. So if you have a sound with a long release, the new notes will interact with those lingering ones. Creates texture.
Wow, that's wild. It's almost like a ghost orchestra or something playing along.
Right. And this modeling goes beyond the oscillators, too.
Oh, really? So what else?
Envelopes, for example, how a sound changes over time.
Right, right.
The multipoly models, the curves of classics like the Monopoly, MS-20, even the ARP Odyssey, and Portamento, the glide effect. Spot on.
So you could really nail those vintage sounds or use them as a starting point.
Exactly. It's a great springboard.
Okay, so you got these virtual voice cards and modeled envelopes. What about oscillators, like the core of the synth?
Oh, it's loaded. 4 per program. 4.
Wow.
And each one can do a ton of waveforms. But here's the kicker. They have 3 modes. Classic, digital, and wave shaper.
Okay, break those down for me. What's so special about each one?
So classic mode, that gives you your traditional analog waveform, sawtooth, square, all that.
Yeah.
But with a lot of depth. You even get hands-on controls for shaping them.
Oh, cool. So even though it's digital, I can still tweak those waveforms like on an analog synth.
You got it. Now, digital mode, that's where it gets really interesting. It's a wavetable oscillator. You can load in custom wavetables, almost like a mini mod wave built in.
Wait, I can import wavetables from the ModWave directly.
Yeah. You can also create your own or import them from other software. The possibilities are huge. And then there's wave shaper mode, perfect for those who like those experimental West Coast synth sounds.
West Coast synthesis, huh? You're going to have to explain that one.
Think of it like taking a simple waveform, like a sine wave, and running it through this crazy shaper function. It distorts and manipulates the waveform, creating all these new harmonics.
So it's kind of like adding distortion to the oscillator itself.
Kind of, yeah. But it's way more nuanced. You can modulate the shape and intensity of the distortion live. Makes for really dynamic, unpredictable sounds.
Wow, that's wild. And on top of all that, you've got a dedicated noise generator and a ring modulator. They really went all out.
For sure. The noise generator adds grit and texture. Ring modulator can get you those metallic, bell-like tones or otherworldly weird stuff. But here's the best part. You can route all of these sound sources
All of them.
through the multipoly's sync and cross-modulation capabilities. It's pretty extensive.
Wait, remind me, sync and cross modulation. What do those do again?
Okay, so sync. Imagine 2 oscillators playing different notes.
Okay.
Sync forces one to reset its cycle whenever the other one finishes a cycle, creates this rhythmic locking, a pulsing, driving sound.
So sync is all about that rhythmic interplay.
Exactly. Now, cross-modulation or X-mod is a little more complex. It uses one oscillator to modulate the frequency of another.
To modulate the frequency, what does that actually sound like?
It can do a lot, from subtle vibrato to extreme distortion, depends on the waveforms and how you set it up. But it's great for dynamic, evolving sounds, always in motion.
So, I could use sync for a driving bass line with pulsing rhythm, and then use cross-modulation to add a wobbly, detuned texture to a lead.
Exactly. And the multipoly gives you so much control over it all. It's like a mini modular synth right there.
Okay, this is blowing my mind already. And we haven't even talked about filters.
Oh, man. The filters. That's a whole other rabbit hole of sound design.
I bet. We're going to have to dive into those next time.
Definitely.
Stay tuned, folks. We're just getting started with our deep dive on the Korg multipoly.
All right, so before we get lost in other parts of this synth, let's talk filters.
Yeah, you teased those earlier. That was a whole other world or something.
Oh, yeah, big time. The multipoly has 2 filter slots per program.
Wait, two? So I can use two filters at the same time?
Exactly. You can run them in series, where the output of one goes into the next, or parallel, processing this signal separately, and you can control the balance between them.
Oh, wow. That's super flexible.
Yeah.
Okay, but what kind of filters are we talking? You mentioned some vintage models, right?
Yep. One of the coolest is a model of the original Monopoly filter, known for its warm, punchy sound. Great for those classic analog vibes.
So that alone could get you pretty close to the original.
Oh, yeah. Then there are the MS-20 filters. Those are famous for their aggressive, biting sound.
Those are great for edgy leads and basses.
Exactly. So you've got smooth and vintage with the Monopoly filter, and then raw and aggressive with the MS-20. But that's just the start.
There's more?
Oh, yeah. There's also a 2-pole filter. It's a little smoother, gentler than the 4-pole ones. Good for mellow pads and subtle textures.
Okay, so a lot of variety already. But what was that multi-filter you mentioned?
Ah, that's a fun one. It lets you morph between different filter modes. You can even blend them together.
So you could create your own hybrid filter.
Exactly. You get some really unique sounds that way. But it gets even wilder. Remember how we talked about using oscillators for sync and cross-modulation?
Yeah.
Well, you can use them to modulate the filter cutoff frequency, too.
Whoa! Modulate the filter with an oscillator. What does that even sound like?
It's crazy. Think like pulsing rhythmic filter sweeps, or a filter that's constantly shifting in time with your music. Really adds movement and energy. You can even modulate the balance between the 2 filters.
So the tonal character of the sound would be morphing.
Exactly. It can get pretty out there.
Okay, so we've got these incredible oscillators feeding into these crazy versatile filters. I'm guessing that's just the start though, right? Because synths are all about modulation. And this thing seems like it's overflowing with modulation possibilities.
Oh, absolutely. Modulation is where this thing shines. We're talking 4 loopable DAH-DSR envelopes, 5 LFOs, and 6 mod processors per program. And then there's motion sequencing 2.0.
Hold on. Slow down a little. DAH-DSR envelopes, what are those?
Okay, so they're like your regular ADSR envelopes, but they add 2 extra stages. Delay and hold.
Okay.
Delay lets you put a pause before the sound starts. Good for percussive stuff or rhythmic variations. And hold sustains the sound at a certain level for a set time.
So you can get even more control over how a sound evolves.
Exactly. Then you've got 5 LFOs. Those are your cyclical signals that can modulate pretty much anything. Filter cutoff, oscillator pitch, you name it.
So like adding vibrato, tremolo, those sorts of things.
Yep. And the LFOs on this are super versatile. You can change their shape, speed, depth, all that. Then there are the mod processors.
Okay, what are those?
Think of them like mini effects for your modulation signals. You could use one to quantize an LFO to a musical scale, for example, or smooth out a modulation. It gets pretty deep.
So you're adding yet another layer of complexity to the modulation.
Yeah. And then we have motion sequencing 2.0, which is like a super powerful sequencer, but for modulation.
Motion sequencing 2.0, is that like the wave sequencing on the wave state?
It's kind of an evolution of that, yeah. But here, you can sequence not just notes, but also filter cutoff, LFO speed, effects parameters, almost anything.
So you could have a sound that's constantly evolving over time.
Exactly. It's great for creating textures that are always moving, or for rhythmic variations.
Okay, I'm starting to see why they call this a polyphonic modular system. Like you've got a whole modular rig inside this thing.
And we're not even done yet. There's the Chaos Physics Pad, the mod knobs, and thousands of modulation destinations.
Wait, Chaos Physics Pad? Like from the Chaos Pad. What's that doing on a synth?
Right. It's pretty cool. This isn't for triggering samples or effects. It controls a simulated physical model. Think of a ball rolling around on a surface.
A ball. How does that translate to sound?
So the ball's position and movement generate 8 modulation signals.
Yeah.
And you can assign those to any parameter you want.
Okay, that's pretty wild. So I could literally play the synth by moving my finger on this pad.
Exactly. Super intuitive and expressive. And you can even tilt and warp the surface the ball is rolling on, which adds another level of control.
Wow, okay. And the mod knobs? I'm guessing those are for more real-time control?
Yep. You get 4 of them, and you can assign them to multiple parameters. Great for subtle tweaks or big sweeping changes on the fly.
So we've got motion sequencing, this chaos physics thing, mod knobs. Is there anything this synth can't modulate?
Well, there are over 500 modulation destinations, so...
5,500. Okay, that's insane. But before we go completely down the modulation rabbit hole, we got to talk effects.
Right, because effects are what really polishes sound, give it character, and the multi-poly is stacked.
Okay, hit me. What kind of effects are we talking about?
So each layer has 3 dedicated effect slots, plus you've got a master reverb and EQ for the whole performance, and the selection is amazing.
So your standard delays, reverbs, that kind of thing.
Oh, it goes way beyond that. You've got those classic effects, of course, but KORG also threw in some really unique stuff, like the talking modulator, the overb algorithm from the OASYS and Kronos, and even models of vintage VOX amps and pedals.
Wait, guitar amps and pedals
Hmm.
in a synth.
Yeah. It's awesome. It adds this whole other dimension. You can run your synth sounds through these classic guitar effects.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So lots of variety there.
Tons. And then, to top it all off, they even included a randomization feature. Generates new sounds and effects combinations at random. Great for inspiration.
This is like a sound designer's dream synth.
Yeah.
But, we haven't talked about layering yet, and I have a feeling there's a lot to unpack there, too.
Oh, yeah. Layering is where it gets really powerful. Remember how we talked about 4 oscillators, 2 filters, all that modulation per program?
Yeah.
Well, you can layer up to 4 programs in a performance.
Wait, 4 programs at once. So I could have, like, a bass line, a pad, a lead, and drums all going at the same time.
Exactly. Each with its own oscillators, filters, modulation effects. And the way you can split and layer them is super flexible. You can use velocity splits, keyboard splits, and this cool thing called layer rotate.
Layer rotate. What's that?
So imagine you've got 4 programs, each with its own distinct sound. Layer rotate lets you cycle through those programs every time you hit a key.
So like a sequencer for programs instead of notes?
Exactly. You can control the order they trigger in, too. And you can even combine layer rotate with the arpeggiator. Gets pretty crazy.
Okay, this is seriously next level. We've only scratched the surface of the layering, though, right?
Yeah, we still need to talk about set lists for organizing performances, smooth sound transitions for live playing, and the editor librarian software.
Wow, it seems like we need another episode to cover all that.
Probably.
Welcome back. We've covered a lot with the KORG multi-poly, oscillators, filters, modulation, all that.
It's a lot, yeah. But there are a few more goodies we need to touch on.
Right, like those set lists and the smooth sound transitions you mentioned.
Exactly. Those are super helpful for live performers. So set lists, they basically let you organize your performances.
Oh, okay. So if I'm playing live, I could have different set lists for different parts of my set.
Yep, like one for your opening songs, one for the middle, one for the encore,
Yeah.
Make switching between sounds super easy. No more menu diving on stage.
That's awesome. No more frantic searching for the right patch. And what about those smooth sound transitions?
So that just makes sure that when you switch between sounds, the notes and effects from the previous sound continue to ring out naturally.
Oh, so no abrupt cutoffs.
Exactly. Everything blends seamlessly, makes your performance sound way more polished.
That's a nice touch. It's kind of subtle, but it makes a big difference. KORG really thought of everything with this synth.
They did. Oh, and we should mention connectivity. The multi-poly has all the usual stuff.
Like MIDI and audio outputs?
Yep. MIDI in and OUT, balanced stereo outs, and a headphone jack. Standard stuff.
Right.
But it also has a USB port.
Okay, and that's for...
MIDI communication, and also for connecting to the editor librarian software.
Ah, right. The editor librarian. What's the deal with that?
It's basically a second front panel for the synth, but on your computer. You can manage sounds, edit parameters in detail, and even see how all the modulation is working.
That's super helpful, especially for a synth this deep. I bet it's nice to have a visual representation of everything going on.
Oh, yeah. And it communicates with the multi-poly super fast over USB networking. No lag or anything.
That's awesome. Man, we've covered so much with this synth.
I know, right? It's been quite a journey.
We started with analog modeling, then went through all the modulation, layering, effects.
And we just scratched the surface, honestly.
The multi-poly is the kind of synth you could spend years with and still discover new things. So for our listeners out there, what's the big takeaway? Why should they be excited about the KORG multi-poly?
It's more than just a synth. It's like a sonic playground, a sound design lab.
It really is. It pushes you to be creative, to experiment.
Whether you're a pro or just starting out, there's something here for you.
It can grow with you as you learn and explore.
Exactly. With its analog modeling, its sound palette, and all that modulation, it's a synth you can fall in love with over and over again.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. So to wrap things up, if you're looking for a synth that's inspiring, challenging, and rewarding, the KORG multi-poly is worth checking out.
For sure.
Well, that's it for our deep dive on the KORG multi-poly. It's been a blast, and I can't wait to see what people do with it.
Me too. It's going to be awesome.
Keep exploring, keep experimenting, keep creating. Until next time.